Hey everyone, today we're going to learn about something that most humans have forgotten that used to be really common knowledge, and it's that acorns are edible. So the acorn is a very nutritious food that used to be the staple food of the indigenous people of this area, the Eastern Woodland Indians. But in addition, anyone who has ancestry anywhere in the entire northern hemisphere of the world probably has ancestors who used acorns as well, because that's where oak trees grow. And humans used to do this when they had a little more time on their hands, because they do require some processing. But it's not too bad. It's just a matter of using water to leach the bitter part of the acorn out so that it's a palatable, it's a non-bitter nut. So these are true nuts. So first things first, safety warning. If you have a nut allergy or anyone in your household does, don't do this activity, obviously. But for everybody who that doesn't apply to, we're going to go ahead and learn the process now. So what you're going to do is you're going to collect some acorns and just make sure that they're in good condition. So they should be hard, and you want to check them out. Obviously, if they have mold inside, you don't want to ever eat moldy food that's black, brown, blue, white, and powdery. You may see holes in some of your acorns. I don't know if you can see that, but that is from the acorn weevil, which is a little grub, a little larva that turns into a weevil, which is a type of beetle. Got some of them here. These little white guys. May or may not be able to see them. So there it is wiggling around. So these live inside the acorns. They render them non-viable, so they never germinate. So they can be a little bit of a pest, but they're edible themselves. So fun fact, these are an edible grub. So we're talking survival here in staple foods. This is something that you could definitely eat. Okay, so another thing you might see is a root coming out. So if it is a little nub of a root, no problem. It's just started to sprout into a young oak tree. You can just break it off and continue the process. If it's like a big tough root, probably a little past its prime. So you're going to take your acorn and you are going to crack it open. Now the primitive skills way would be with a rock, right? Before modern technology. That works just fine. You could even use your teeth to crack it open. They don't have a very thick shell like other nuts, like acorns. I mean, like walnuts. Okay, so you get that off. And let's go ahead and talk about parts of the acorn from a botanical standpoint, okay? So we have the outer shell, which in biology would be called the pericarp. Para, like perimeter, is around. So the pericarp is the protective shell. Then inside it, you have the testa, which is the seed coat. You may have learned it as seed coat in your Montessori biology lessons. So let me see if I can separate it. These ones are kind of attached to each other, but inside, it's kind of like, you know the brown skin of an almond? And when you blanch an almond, you take that brown skin off. There's a little papery, thin skin, and that just further protects the seed inside. The seed inside is called the embryo. And then the little baby root, if it's there, is called the radicle. So the radicle is the first thing to often emerge from a seed. When you open it, it naturally splits into two halves. And as a review, these are called the cotyledons, which are the first leaves of the plant, but they're not true leaves. This is before the plant is able to create leaves which produce chlorophyll, the stuff that make them green, to absorb sunlight and make their own food. So they need a source of food, and this comes from the mother plant when they're first grown. Okay? So those are the parts of the acorn. So you're going to get the meat out. It's called the nut meat, or the acorn embryo. And you're going to get it out, and you are going to crush it into pieces about the size of aquarium gravel. So just like little pebble-sized pieces. You can use your rock, you can use another kitchen tool, you can use a hammer. Each one kind of has a different consistency to it. So do whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm getting mine into some little pieces. And then you can try a little nibble. They're not toxic when they're not leached. They're just really bitter. And the bitterness, so you can try a little bit. The bitterness comes from what's called tannins, and you may have experienced tannins before, like if you've tried an unripe persimmon. Tannins make foods very astringent, that dries your mouth out, and that's just a plant defense mechanism. So you don't eat the seeds or the fruit that contains the seeds until they're fully ripe and ready to be planted. So it's its way to get you to hold off until the seed is ready to reproduce. Okay, so this one is not too bad. It's not too bitter, but it's a little bitter. So maybe not as much leaching required. Okay, so you're going to take these little pieces, and there are two methods, cold water and warm water, or boiling water. So you're going to take your little pieces. If you're doing the cold water method, just go ahead and drop them in a bowl of water. Now it's clear, but in a day or a couple of days, it's going to start to change color. It might get a little bit tinted, like a brownish color. If it's got a lot of tannins, it'll be dark brown, like coffee, or just a little bit cloudy. And every time it starts to change color or get cloudy or opaque, go ahead and pour it out and then fill it with clean water. And you'll know it's ready when the water stays clear and when you just try a little bit of the nut and it has no more of that bitter, mouth-drying taste to it. So that's the cold water method. That takes several days, depending on how many tannins are in there. But what's great about it is it's really good for preparing the nuts for making flour, which is what we're going to talk about in just a moment. The boiling water method, as you can imagine, is just using the boiling water to do the same thing. Goes a lot faster. You can do it in probably, under an hour, just boiling, changing the water, boiling, changing the water. So what's nice is that with the cold water method is that even though it takes more days, it doesn't take as much time. It's kind of passive. You just leave them in there, dump it maybe once a day or two, and it just does its own thing. So I think in a way it's kind of easier. The indigenous people in many parts of the world would just put acorns in a river and put the pieces in a river and let the water wash away the tannins. So we're going to go ahead and once they are not bitter, pour out the water and take the pieces, and then we need to dry them. So you're going to put your oven on between 175 and 180 degrees. Spread out the pieces in a single layer, and then you're going to put them in and just basically cook them until they're dehydrated. We're not really roasting them. We don't want them to get burnt. We just want them to dry out. So if you have a dehydrator machine at home, you could use that. Every maybe 45 minutes or so, just so you can kind of stir it around, make sure it's kind of evenly getting dehydrated. And I would also recommend keeping your oven open a few inches because that is going to let the steam out. If your oven gets too steamy, it might make your acorns mushy instead of dry to make them into a flour. So once they are all dried out, you are going to then, using either your primitive method or your more advanced method, like a blender, go ahead and grind them into a flour. So you're going to make them into a powder, and it's going to come out a lot like almond flour or kind of the consistency of corn grits, kind of a coarse flour. And they make awesome pancakes, muffins. They're very nutritious, and they're just really available. So this is free food that's all around us that people have kind of like forgotten how to use and have stopped using. But it's actually, it's not really that much work. It's really fun. It's a fun kind of fall craft to do. And if you didn't want to go through all the steps to make them into flour, all you need to do is just leach them in water and then you can eat them. They're just a little bland that way. So if you want to give them a little more flavor, roast them in the oven or on a pan on low heat and stir them around, kind of like you would toast hazelnuts or something for a baking recipe. Okay, so your assignment is to find some acorns, and you don't need to go through all these steps to make flour, so that's totally optional. Some of you may want to, and that's awesome if you do. If you just want to do the minimum assignment, what I'd like you to do is to leach the acorns. You can just use one acorn and get the shell off, get the testa or the seed coat off, put it in some cold or boiling water, and do that in changes of water until you can actually eat the acorn. Just to have that experience. I think it's really valuable. It can be really delicious if you prepare them well, and that's it. Oh, last thing. The type of acorn really affects how many tannins are in it. So we identify oaks by their leaf morphology or their leaf shape. So the pointy lobed leaves, the lobes are the ins and outs of the leaf. The pointy lobed leaves tend to be the red oaks and the pin oaks. What is ideal for making acorn flour are the wavy lobed leaves, which are the white oak. White oaks are notorious for having very low tannins, but really every species of oak has edible acorns, so you can use any type. And I think that's it. So let me know if you have any questions, and have fun leaching the tannins from an acorn and trying, for many of you, what will be your first acorn. All right, have a great day, guys. See you later.